Good morning, students. Last class, we discussed the features of object-oriented programming, the modularity, data abstraction or just abstractions, and then data encapsulations, and then we discussed inheritance, then we discussed polymorphism, and we discussed dynamic binding, and one more is message passing. So because of these features, this object-oriented programming is one of the modern programming language. Even today we use this object-oriented programming techniques. There may be different, even C++ is an example, Java is an example of object-oriented programming. There are many other programming languages which adopt this OOPS. OOPS is a concept. So using the concept, there are many programming languages. So today's fifth generation of programming language, if you are talking about this OOPS, object-oriented programming skill, is the one which will be massively adopted by the programmers. So let us learn some benefits. So what are the advantages or what are the benefits of having this OOPS concepts or OOPS programming language? Already I have told this, everything is treated like objects. How we treat in real world, it's also similar in a programming world. There is a close relationship. That is the main cause of using this programming language, and also it provides the security of the code programs, and also it hides. That's how we can provide security. It's abstract. That's all these features makes this programming language very essential for today's software development. So OOPS is indeed a very beneficiary tool, which helps in programming, efficient programming, because the idea of OOPS techniques was overcome the drawbacks of earlier procedural and structural programming. So what are the drawbacks of this procedural and structural programming means? So they do not have a security of code, even though they have a modularity, but there is a writing code is it takes longer time and difficult in modifying. There are a lot of disadvantages. The main is security was not there, data security, and implementing is a quite complicated. So the new technology provides a programmer with a greater productivity, a quality software at a lesser maintenance cost. That is the reason, the major advantages. So why do we include this means these are the reasons why we use the object-oriented programming languages. OOPS models the real world entities very well. So whatever we have talking about real world, the same thing, that's why I said, so we treat objects in real world, the same thing could also be implemented. That's so OOPS models the real world. So what is in the real world? The same model can be used to develop the programs. So almost closer. How we treat in real life, in the similar way, this could also be treated in a programming language. I think now if I say these things, so you might be not in a position to imagine. So what is because you never did the programming, but as you go writing programs, then you'll able to understand. That's why, so how earlier what happens means the approach for understanding the real things, real world, and then developing program is entirely different. So this is the way we have to get understand by the software or programmers, then we have to implement in our own way, the conditions or the features offered by structural programming. There was a difficult, not one-to-one relation, but this is like what is there exactly similar way we can do this. That's why OOPS models the real world entities very well. So inheritance extends the use of existing classes and eliminates the redundant code, and hence supports the code reusability. So already I talked about inheritance, where one class acquires the properties from another classes. So that indirectly, if there is existing class, the same class could also be used again. That is the code reusability instead of rewriting. That's a redundant. Redundant means the same code present one or more places. Suppose you want to do some square root function, we have a steps means this is also already in one class. The same square root function could also be used in another class, thereby reducing the same code in another class. So that is how simple you can understand. That is multiple places, no need to use, can eliminate because of what we call, because of inheritance. That's one of the reason. So inheritance advantages. So extends the use of existing classes and eliminates the redundant code and supports for code reusability. That is indirectly, it's a code reusability. It's one of the best features because no need to write again and again. It saves the time and space of the computer resource, and also it becomes much faster and maintenance becomes much easier. So the same code is used in many places. That's how we can think it's one of the advantages. Next is data hiding. That's a data abstraction providing only essential feature and hiding unwanted details. So helps to create or build secure programs that cannot be invaded by the code in other parts of the program. So that's indirectly is providing the security to the computer programs. So that is data hiding. That's because of this is one of the features of data abstraction. Because of data abstractions, we have this data hiding that helps in secure the programs that cannot be invaded by code in other part of the program. So that what is happening in one part of the code and another in part cannot be seen or cannot be accessed. That's one of the advantages. So multiple instances of an object coexist without any interference. So multiple instances of an object coexist. You can create many objects of the same class. They exist together without any interference because they are treated differently. So that's a multiple instance of an object coexist. So we have created an object from this class and also created an object from the same class another. So there is a multiple because this object can has access all these things. So this object has also access these things. So without interfering because of the class is packed with the data and member functions together. So when you create many objects which exist together, there is no problem. So using this object, you can access any part of the class. It is like in your classroom, maybe having many windows. So that doesn't make, maybe adjacent to each other, that doesn't make difference to the classroom. In exactly same way, you can have many objects and that doesn't make difference. An object is an instance of class. So it's a one variable, it's like one part of the class. So then you can use many parts. Even though exist, there is no interference between them. So that is one of the advantages. The work can be divided easily because since the project or object based and each object can be developed by different people resulting in a faster code development. So what actually it is talking about modularity. So what does a modularity means? You can create different modules, self-contained independent program segment and tested can be executed independently. That is what here we are trying to use because this supports for modularity. The work can be divided easily since the projects are object based, that's object oriented programming. Each object can be developed by different people resulting in faster development of code. Here what is we are talking about object is nothing but modules because this object oriented programming support for modularity. You can create different objects and these different objects are independent. They can be tested and developed independently. So thus it becomes faster code development. So when it is given for different peoples, different module can be developed by different peoples, so then this results in faster development of code. Hoops can be easily upgraded from small to large systems. It's a portability because it is very easy because everything is in the compact packed, so that can be we have in the small machines can be easily upgraded, easily can be transferred from because the software is such a easy thing too easy to transfer because of object oriented programming. It's not difficult. I don't think this is needed because in other programming language could also be transferred from smaller to larger system. Let's say easily upgradable, that's they're mentioning because these higher systems, the larger system may support for this what is called object oriented programming. That's why maybe you can very easily upgrade it. That's transferred from smaller system to larger system. Complexity of the software is easily manageable, tested and maintained because of modularity, because of these features what we discussed so far. The complexity of software is easily manageable. Of course, it is because we use abstraction, and also we use modularity, and also we use code review, that is polymorphism. Sometimes we use dynamic binding. So all these things makes much, you know, testing like modularity. Because of modularity, testing can be done easily. Manageable because complexity, we have a polymorphism, we have a data encapsulation. So that's how it becomes, complexity is treated separately, individually. So that's why it becomes much easier. So next, it is possible to map object from problem domain to program domain. Yes, of course, we can, because what is, we are talking in object-oriented programming, everything is object. The same way, how we treat could also be transferred to the, that's a problem domain to solution domain. That is the problem, how you write in exactly the same way you can write in a program also. That's why they have written problem domain to program domain. So what is the problem environment, how we find the solution, exactly the way you can transfer it into the program domain. So that's because of treating object-oriented programming. That's in real world. Objects is also treated objects in the program also. So message passing techniques for communication between the objects makes the interface description simple with the external system. Because message passing is a technique of communication, because we are sending some messages between the objects. So through the objects, that's a member functions, we send some and makes the interference descriptions with the simpler with the external system. Description simpler with the external system. So what happens here, what happens means, so whenever we have objects, whenever we call objects means, so this message passing itself is a interface with the external system. So maybe I'm trying to use, I may be external to this object-oriented program. So I have developed the software. So because of this message passing technique, that message itself gives a description about why I'm sending this one. What is this? That is in such a way that that communication will be explained by the message passing. That's the interface is very easy for the external system, for our outer side people to communicate with the software. That is message passing techniques for communication between the objects makes the interface description simpler. So interface means we are trying to like abstract. We are providing only essential features. Like I want to send, find the square root means that SQRT itself is like message passing. So that's described in simpler way. So SQRT, and then I should know what I have to send now. If I send 16, so this is the message passing, 16, the number has to be sent to find the square root. Because of this message passing, this description, now anybody can understand. So when you have a square root means, so it will find the square root. It is used to find the square root. That is how the description is simpler, because of message passing exists. Otherwise, it would have been difficult. So that's one of the features, that's advantages. Next is standard working modules communicate with one another, and we can therefore build programs from these modules which can save development time and increase the productivity. Again, it's a features of modularity, the simple features. Standard working modules, that's whichever existing modules communicate with one another. You can send and receive with this module different modules, and can build programs from these modules. So using these modules, you can build a computer program and save development time and increase the productivity. Because of existing modules you are using, and also modularity and inheritance, what we are talking about. So using this, you can build one more module, so that instead of wasting time developing the new module, and then that's taking time. So on testing, debugging, all those things. But now what happens, so already existing, they are working using these modules. Again, you can create one more module that increases the development time and also increase the productivity. Development time means you don't need to waste. Automatically it is the existing, you can use it. That's also one of the advantages of inherit. That's what we call OOPS concept. So data center design approach helps to capture more details of the model in implementable form. So here what we are talking about, it is not the function oriented concept. So here it is a data centered. Data centered means, so we are going for the characteristics. and of characteristics and details we are trying to understand. And then we perform the functions behavior. So already I've told about what is class means. Is we have a data and also we have member functions. What is data represents the characteristics of an object. What are the functions? They represent the features of object. So once you concentrate on the characteristics, so once you know about the basics of the characteristics, then automatically you can decide what operations can be performed. That's why designing becomes much easier and it is much closer for implementation. That is a data-centered design approach. So it is more on characteristics based rather than saying it is a feature based. It is that's when you take an object, so we think of characteristics is more important, then we learn about features. So this is a data center design approach. This helps in developing computers much easier. That's an implementable form. You're taking data, means automatically you decide what operation we can perform with this data. Thus it becomes easier for development. In exams, they may be asking, they mention the benefits of object-oriented programming. So you have to write any 5. This is very important. Try to learn theoretically. These are important things. You must go through with this. So next, we should understand one thing, that develop software that is easy to use, externally difficult, and even next to impossible. However, object-oriented programming tools helps to achieve this to some extent. So to develop software that is easy to use we have to develop software such that is easy to use is extremely difficult. So developing such software is difficult and even next to it is impossible. So to develop such programs are very, let's say, impossible. However, this object-oriented programming, that's what we are talking about, this object-oriented programming tools, what we discussed, like the features, helps to achieve this to some extent. So what is the main concept here is they're indirectly appreciating the object-oriented programming. So developing a good software, that is, a good software means easy to use. And because people who use the software may not be knowing about the computers and they don't know how to use the computer, and also they do not know about the knowledge about the computer. So for those people, you are making the computer means, software means it is going to be very difficult and sometimes it is impossible. So therefore, but at least you have to learn about computers. Therefore, this object-oriented programming tools like abstraction, modularity, inheritance, data binding, and data encapsulations. So maybe polymorphism. These are all the tools which helps to achieve that easy to use software to some extent. So that is the beauty of this software development using object-oriented programming skills. There are some disadvantages of object-oriented programming. Let us learn what are the disadvantages. So every aspects in the universe has both things, that is advantages and disadvantages, of course. So but we need to understand that when the percentage of advantage is more compared to disadvantages, then there is no harm in accepting it. So that's what in real life, no. So whenever we make decisions, we based on positive approaches, positive things, then definitely there is a positive and negative. There's advantages and disadvantages. Our decision will be more towards the positive. So when you have more positive, then we accept and we use it. Exactly similar way here also. Whenever we have programming languages, means so they have some advantages or disadvantages. So whichever has more advantages than the disadvantages, then there is no wrong in accepting it. So that is, oops is also such things. Because of this disadvantages, already we have, because we have more advantages, but it also possesses some disadvantages. And let us identify what are the disadvantages and why they are treated as a disadvantages. The first one, oops uses tricky methods to develop programming or to do programming. So tricky methods means, like we discussed, like data encapsulation, dynamic binding. So these are like some tricky, like abstractions. These are some tricky we feel, because you cannot understand when you do the programming. It looks like it's like complicated, but it's actually easy. We have some advantages, but it's some tricky method for developing program, which is very difficult and common when you try to understand these things. And we need a special skills such as thinking in terms of design skills. So we need to think in designing. That's a special skills. Normal people, we may not be able to do like this unless until you know about programming, how we to think. A programming skills and thinking in terms of objects are required for a programmer. So whatever we see, that's why this is one of the important if you want to be a good programmer. So one of the more important is if you want to develop a computer programming means thinking in terms of design skills, we can call it programming skills, and thinking in terms of objects are required for programming. This is additional things. It may not be knowing for normal people. So if you want to develop software means, so we need the special skills like how to design this. This when you take real-time problem is like this, like area of triangle. How to write this one? That's a design. How to design this one, and programming. How should I do the programs, and how to this is object-oriented programming. How to think them in the form of objects, that is in the class data and member functions. So all these things are additional skills required in order to use the OOPS object-oriented programming. This is a disadvantageous part. I would say this is not a disadvantageous part. This is actually one of the advantageous part. Because it is not easy for everyone, that's why they kept as a negative. Because if you want to be a good programmer, these three things are very essential. That is thinking in terms of design skills and programming skills, and thinking in terms of objects are very essential if you want to be a software developer. So that's disadvantages here because of it's not easy. So proper planning and design is required before programming using OOP technique. So we need a lot of plannings and design is required before you use OOPS techniques. So this is, we need of course any programming, anything you do in life, we need a proper planning. With the planning only we can do effectively. Proper planning, and one more is design. Proper planning and design is required before we programming OOPS technique. So these are some disadvantages. In exams, they may be asking for 3 marks. So mention the disadvantages of OOPS. So these 3 points we have to write. Okay. So next we learn some applications. So where and all we use this OOPS concepts. So I think so this OOPS is used in most of the field of computer applications. It is because there is most of the places we use the OOPS concepts. Most of the software developers use this some technique only, that's OOPS only. So after coming to know the benefits, it is required to know the application as well. The most popular application of OOPS has been in the area of user interface design. Like Windows operating system, we use this. Many of the windowing systems have been developed using this technique as because of message passing. So this becomes very, and real-time systems and embedded systems are developed using this complex attributes and methods. And so, some of the areas of applications we have here, you can see that some of the applications are object-oriented databases. Like banking systems, databases comes in where we handle large amount of data. Database means like billing systems, like a reservation system, air ticket reservations, anything where we have a large amount of data, where we have to process, like there we use object-oriented databases. And then also we use hypermedia, expert text and hypertext. So hypermedia means it is related to the what we call online, what we are using internet. So there that's called hypermedia. All those things are relevant to hypermedia, expert text and hypertext. So whatever we are working with today's online, some online databases, all hypermedia, videos, text, all those things, there we use OOPS concept. Artificial intelligence and expert system. So this is the actually the artificial intelligence is the today's most important field of application of computer science. So what is this artificial intelligence? You're making the machines to become intelligent artificially. I think this is one of the important concept which is developing nowadays. So artificial, see, so how we become intelligent, that's the first question. So I think, so when you're born, you may not be knowing many things. So can you speak like what we are doing? So when I'm born, I may not be knowing all those things. But as we grow, we learn all these things. As the time goes, we try to learn we accumulate more knowledge, and we started, you know, we talk about the subject, and we build so many things, we do so many things. That is because of intelligence. These are all gained from the external outside. We learn, we accept, we learn all those things. So this is, so in similar way, people thought, why, how we people, we think, we do some actions, and we do design so many things, we work so many things. So in similar way, the people thought, why can't we do this with the machines? So that is what artificial intelligence. It's not so easy what we're saying. I think you are maybe seen some movies based on this. Best is a robot, Rajnikant movie. So it's artificial intelligence. He developed, and it becomes, it's only for imagination, but it will not be advanced like that. But it's only for entertainment purpose they did it. But still, they are able to do it. Maybe tomorrow we may be having, instead of employees like workers, we may be having robots. So robots will be the next, because of artificial intelligence and expert system, they are able to make decisions, and they are able to support, humans. Will be assisting humans for all this. Now we are using machines for assisting calculations, other things, but they are not using machines for the many places. But now maybe we are using robots in the future, and most of the places we may be having robots. So this is because that supports. Using this, we can develop such things. And when you go for higher studies, you will be learning about this artificial intelligence and expert system. So next is decision support system and office automation systems. So these are all automatically, you might have seen signals, maybe all controlled by. So there we write programs using office automation. So entire office, all the works is automatic. So it could also be developed using this object-oriented programming. And parallel programming and neural networks. So parallel programming means its ability to execute uh, more than one program at the same program. So parallel, because our brain is exactly like parallel programming, multitasking. And neural networks, this is also one of the relevant to artificial intelligence, and neural networks is also very important, that all those things you learn, these are all, it takes 1-2 hours to explain this neural networks, how neurons like our brain functions. In exactly similar way they are trying to develop, and parallel programming. It's almost, it's like artificial intelligence, pattern matching, and there are so many things. This is a field where, this today's trend is working on these things. And also we have a computer aided manufacture, computer aided design, uh, CAM system. So these are all today's way they are using. And also we use a simulation and modeling. So what is simulation means? A method of modeling the system. Simulation is exactly creating an environment, and we are trying to use those in a system. Like you are making a complicated surgery, then you cannot do on the patient directly. So create the same environment on the system, and you do according to your technique, your own idea, and let us see that patient how you work. And you may be whenever we do something means it may not be successful rate is we do not know, because it is on the execution there may be some errors. When you're doing surgery, you will be able to understand, oh, this is the mistakes I have done. So if it is do directly on the people means the people may die. That's if you do it on the machine, so you can possibly reduce those errors. That doesn't guarantee that this may be true, but certain extent it will be secured. That's how. That's what simulation, and also like a pilot training. So autopilot we call them. So we do not directly take into the flight and started explaining. There also we go for simulation. That's like we put it in artificial knowledge systems, and we teach all those things, and then we go to the system. That's what simulation. That's also a big topic when you go for higher studies. These are all some applications of oops. So this completes this chapter. And applications they may be asking sometimes, disadvantages they may be asking, and also they are asking the benefits, advantages, mention the advantages, application, something like that. And also they may be asking, more importantly, is the features of object-oriented programming, like modularity. Let's say explain modularity, sometimes they may asking, and all other features like abstractions, and then we have data encapsulations, we have inheritance, and then we have polymorphism, dynamic binding, message passing, all maybe individually they may be asking explanation, or they may be asking mention the features of the object-oriented programming. So this is a very important chapter. So you try to understand and write the questions answer for these things. So you can see here, define structural programming, define top-down design, what is bottom-up, what is top-down design. This is in the previous chapters. You can answer this. Define object. An instance of the class is called an object. What is object-oriented programming? So object is a modern programming language to develop the softwares. That's how you can write. What is class is a group of data and functions that you can define. Define module is a self-contained independent program segment. That's what is modularity, abstractions, all those things you have to write the answers. And similarly, difference between object-oriented, this is in the previous, I talked about this object-oriented programming, mentioned two characteristics of like all these things. It is there, and so write answer for these questions. The 5 marks question possibly. So describe detailed various characteristics of suitable example, mention the various advantages and disadvantages of OOPS, and mention the various application of OOPS, and then mention the various benefits of OOPS. So these are the possible questions, or try to answer these questions and like assignment. Okay. So we'll continue in the next class.